Castform is one of the most theory-crafted Pokemon of all time. People are always proposing ideas to buff Castform, new evolutions for Castform, mega evolutions for Castform. This is a Pokemon that so many people seem to want to fix or change or rework. Why is that? Well, I think it actually makes perfect sense. Castform is the perfect Pokemon to invite such speculation because it is terrible, but it is also really interesting. Castform is a normal type Pokemon with the ability Forecast, which allows it to change its type depending on the active weather. If sun is up, it changes to a fire type, water type if rain is up, and ice type if hail or snow is up. In practice, this is pretty bad. As far as weather synergy goes, you would rather probably just run a water type on your team directly than run this guy that transforms into a water type in rain. There are more powerful weather synergies to take advantage of. Castform offers very little. The concept it's designed around isn't that good, and also its stats are only 70 across the board, which is quite low. But this is a Pokemon that captures the imagination. The different forms that it has are quite beautiful, and this is a Pokemon that is long overdue for some sort of buff or evolution or something. And you can really imagine an evolution for Castform being really cool, with some sort of unique weather synergy that plays into this idea of changing forms based on the weather, or having some unique effect depending on the weather, having some move, some new signature move that morphs depending on the weather, like Weather Ball did back when Castform was first released. So it makes sense that so many fans have theory crafted their own ideas for a potential Castform evolution or mega or buff, etc. It's a Pokemon that deserves it. It's a Pokemon that people like, and that they wish there was more to this idea. It's a very unique Pokemon that just doesn't really work in practice. But there is undeniable potential and design space here for expansions upon this concept. So today I thought I'd look at various proposals to fix Castform and analyze them, see if they'd be any good, whether I think they're well designed or interesting. Because this is a case where I think the theory crafting is warranted and makes perfect sense. A lot of Pokemon theory crafting is just mindlessly buffing a Pokemon that's sometimes supposed to be bad, like, I don't know, Ariados. You don't really need to buff Ariados, it's fine. Not every Pokemon's supposed to be competitively relevant or overpowered, but with Castform, it actually feels like there's more to explore here with this concept. The Pokemon is interesting, but even when you use it in a regular single-player playthrough, it doesn't achieve much. It's like a weird tech demo of a Pokemon that could be so much more. First, we have a proposed buff to the Forecast ability from the Reddit user OwnEnvironment1675, and I think this is a pretty cool idea. In addition to Forecast changing Castform's type based on the active weather, this user also proposes that Forecast could be changed to set a weather effect based on the weather rock that Castform is holding. So if it's holding a damp rock, it would set rain. If it's holding a heat rock, it would set sun, etc. This would cost Castform its item slot, sort of, but this would be a good item to run in this context anyway, as it would extend the weather that they're currently setting. And then Castform would of course change its type to match the weather as well, being able to directly benefit from the weather it's setting. I personally think this is a pretty good idea. I like it because I don't think it would be too powerful. Even though weather setting abilities are very strong, and have been known to significantly buff Pokemon that get them, like Pelipper when it received Drizzle, I still think this Pokemon would be pretty weak actually, compared to top tier weather setters. As a sun setter, Ninetales and Torkoal would certainly be better. As a rain setter, Pelipper is clearly superior. As a hail or snow setter, probably Alolan Ninetales outdoes an ice type Castform. And I suppose Castform wouldn't be able to set sand since it doesn't actually have a sand form. That's the one weather that doesn't transform it into a different type. But I think a lot of mid to low tiers would appreciate having this option as a malleable weather setter. They can set any type of weather at once, and act as an enabler for teammates in those scenarios. A lot of mid to low tiers lack good weather setters, so this would fill a gap in that department for a lower power level format. It would also give Castform much more of an identity. At the moment, it's scarcely ever used, even in the very lowest of tiers. It's got an interesting concept that just doesn't really function, but this would make it quite good in lower tiers, I think. This almost reminds me of Ditto being reworked to have the ability Imposter to immediately transform on switch in, which turned Ditto from another example of a pretty interesting but useless Pokemon to one that actually does function a bit more now, and leans into its identity of transforming a bit more. This, for Castform, would lean into its identity of being associated with weather and having different forms based on the weather, but now it can hold a weather rock and set that weather itself. I think this is a small but elegant idea that would be quite fitting and work pretty well. Be a welcome new addition. Wouldn't be top tier or anything, but it would be far better than Castform in its current state. Now, I do have to draw attention to the fact that this original post did not actually say weather rock. Rather, it said that Castform would change its form based on the weather rick it is holding. I personally assume that this is a mistake and they meant to type weather rock, but it does raise the question of whether they were actually referring to Rick from the cartoon television series, and if so, I would have a lower opinion of this idea. I think it would be a worse idea in that case. But I don't believe that's what they were going for. I think that was actually a typo. Next, we have another proposed buff to the forecast ability from the Reddit user HatHey1234556. In this proposed change, Castform would receive +1 to its highest attacking stat and also +1 speed every single time it changes forms in a battle. And this user also proposes that Castform receive a new sand form with an image attached, proposing what the sand form might look like. Very cool. I agree that it should have a sand form. I think that would be good. It would make perfect sense. It's sort of strange that it doesn't. Now, this change is possibly enough to make Castform viable, to be honest. Castform actually has quite a good special attacking move pool with pretty much all the coverage you could ever want, and with this ability it would certainly be significantly more threatening. Even though the 70 base stats are not high, instantly receiving a boost whenever you change form means that you start off actually outrunning much of the game with a +1 speed boost, equivalent to that of a choice scarf boost. And with a +1 special attack, also actually achieve a significant damage output. You could chuck a choice specs on top and spam Weather Ball, and I think this would be enough to make the Pokemon good. Another hidden benefit of this is the fact that if the enemy overwrites your weather that you've built the team around and sets their own weather, Castform will change forms again to the new weather and then gain another stat increase. So if you're a Sun team and you're running Sunny Castform and they switch in Pelipper, they're giving you even more speed and even more special attack, and you're still able to utilize Weather Ball to pretty overwhelming effects. So this would actually be a little bit difficult to stop in traditional ways. You would have to avoid resetting the weather, which is usually what you want to do in a weather matchup. There's a part of me that almost thinks this is a bit too powerful, because it would be a bit strange to see Castform in OU in its unevolved state, as it is, just one-hit KOing Darkrai or something. That doesn't feel right. I almost think there might be a bit of dissonance between Castform's power level and its visual appearance, though this is something that sometimes happens in Pokemon. An unassuming little creature is very powerful competitively. There's many such cases. I would not hate this if this actually happened. I think this would be rather interesting. But maybe I would personally prefer a new evolution for Castform that looks visually more imposing to be the one at the OU power level, rather than buffing base Castform so significantly like this. That would make more sense to me. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's an interesting idea. And in particular, I like the way that it would punish weather resetting. Here's another one from Lava Toucan. Yet another rework of Forecast. This seems to be a common theme here. Forecast now summons weather and changes form upon switch in depending on Castform's highest stat. Each form also has reworked stats. So here's their proposed new stats for each form. Sunny Castform is now an offensive mixed attacker with 110 in its attack and special attack and 90 base speed. And if attack or special attack is your highest stat, you will transform into the Sunny form and summon Sun. Okay? Next we have the Rain form, which is defensively oriented with 115 in its defense and special defense. and 80 speed. And the way you transform into this one is by having defense or special defense as your highest stat. And finally, the snow form has a massive 140 base speed, 80 in attack and special attack now, still 70 for everything else. And to transform into this one, you need to have speed or HP as your highest stat. This is a pretty significant rework, isn't it? This completely changes the Pokemon to a direct weather setter that can become any form it wants based on its EV spread. And also, much like the first proposed change, it allows Castform to be a weather setter for any weather it likes between sun, rain, or snow/hail. They've also suggested some move pool additions, most notably I think Aurora Veil, which makes sense on a snow setting Castform. And also some boosts like Calm Mind and Swords Dance. I think that this version of Sunny Castform seems promising. It's competing with Ninetales, and it is much better offensively than Ninetales is, with much higher offensive stats, both attack and special attack. It would probably be better. The only downside is that you cannot run a plus speed nature on this, or you will become the snow form according to the parameters, so you would have to run a modest or adamant nature, meaning you'd be a bit slow compared to Ninetales. You can be plus speed. Also, Ninetales has access to the utility of Encore and Healing Wish, whereas this Castform does not have these options. But as a straight-up offensive Pokemon, it would be much better. It would be quite a formidable threat in itself, maybe even a self-sufficient threat. I will say that the physical attack increase is pretty useless here for Castform. In the additional moveset suggestions, they did not include any fire-type attacks, or very many physical attacks in general. There's Ice Shot and Aqua Jet as proposed options, but Castform's physical move pool is quite limited. The best option here would probably be Double Edge, I suppose, just as a miscellaneous physical attack that can hit special walls for good damage. And that would be alright against perhaps a Clodsire or a Blissey, but not particularly noteworthy, actually. I guess the physical mixed attacking potential of this Sunny Castform wouldn't be as good as it looks. But I think this would be a genuine consideration for a new Sun setter. Castform Rainy form is promising as well as a mono water type with good defenses. However, I do think Pelipper would be better than this. Pelipper has a superior utility move pool, probably a better defensive typing overall, and also options like U-Turn and Roost for straightforward healing. But maybe Castform's Rain form here would outrank Politoed as a alternative rain setter, and it might be a bit better in certain contexts. It's got Aqua Jet now. That's not that powerful though, with only 70 base attack. And the Snowy form is interesting as well, as an extremely fast snow setter that can get Aurora Veil up very quickly. But overall, I still think Alola Ninetales would probably be better. Alola Ninetales has a better typing of Ice Fairy, which is significantly better than Mono Ice, I would say. And it also has important utility like Encore, and access to the move Freeze Dry, which Castform does not have. That's a pretty significant coverage option that Castform is lacking compared to Ninetale. My first thought about this was that this is a bit too much of a buff for Castform, but when you actually break it down, I don't even think that these new proposed forms would necessarily outclass any of the already existing weather setters. They might be viable alternatives, but I actually think this is an alright proposal. This is okay. The one thing is that the attack increase on Sunny Castform feels a bit irrelevant when your actual physical attacking options are so limited. I suppose it doesn't hurt, but it's also not really very impactful. Overall, I think that this is a pretty okay proposal for a rework. Maybe a little bit contrived with the way you change it to the different forms based on your stats, but I suppose it's comparable to an ability like Photosynthesis, which also activates based on your highest stat, also Beast Boost. It's not an unheard of concept, but those abilities, to be fair, just provided direct stat increase to your highest stat. This, however, would have a form change based on your stats, which is not something we've seen before. It's a little bit complicated. I imagine this would be pretty confusing in an in-game playthrough where presumably IVs are random and your Castform would just be a different form, perhaps to a casual player in a completely random capacity. But I don't know, maybe that would add some intrigue and mystery into how to change the Castform form. I mean, it's kind of similar to Hidden Power or something, which is a mechanic that existed and was largely useless for casual players and incomprehensible, but extremely useful for competitive players. So maybe that's something similar to this that you could compare it to. It's at least an interesting idea. I appreciate the effort put into this one. Although I think the simple change of just having Castform set weather based on its held rock is way more elegant and intuitive, and it would not require the Pokemon to be completely reworked or anything. At the same time though, this is more inventive and more of a buff for the Pokemon, where the previous change wouldn't be that powerful. This would be much more powerful, without necessarily going too overboard and over buffing either. Now this one is interesting. It's from the user When Buffaloes Fly, and it comes with some very nice accompanying art with proposed new forms for Castform. Here's what it says. The forecast ability is once again being reworked. This seems to be the main plan of attack to change Castform, is to rework its ability Forecast. If Castform uses a flying, ice, fire, or electric move, it will change into that form before using the move. If the respective weather is active, Castform will be locked into that form. I'm trying to understand what this means. This is quite complicated. So they've proposed a bunch of new forms for Castform, including a gas form that is water and fire, a liquid form that is distinct to its rainy form, but it looks similar and is a water flying type, solid form, which is water ice type, and plasma form was a water electric type. I like the artwork, but I have to say this is a very confusing rework for Castform, where it is now like, who's that character in Dota that has like 1,000 moves? It is far too complex for me to understand. Invoker, that's what I'm thinking of. You've turned a Castform into Invoker here, where depending on the move you used and the time of day it is, it transforms into a different state of being. One of them is extremely similar to the rain form. It also says that if a weather effect is active, it will supersede these new forms and just be normal Castform, which is a little strange, because that would be quite bad, I would think. It would kind of erase its original concept, because being a normal Castform form with 70 in all the stats would be far worse than being these new Castforms, which seem more powerful and have higher stats according to the stat change section of the image here, where liquid, solid, and gas form all have 100 in their defense, whereas normal Castform has 70. I'm starting to comprehend this. Okay, so if you use a flying move, you become liquid form. If you use a fire move, you become gas form. If you use an ice move, you become solid form. And if you use an electric move, you become plasma form. So you change forms based on what move you use, overwritten by the weather if that's active to just be normal Castform forms. I'd say I like all of the visual designs of these proposed new forms, except for liquid form, which looks far too similar to rainy form Castform, and I didn't even realize for a hot minute here that this was actually a new concept and not the same as normal Castform. I also have just noticed that why are all of these water types? They're all water dual types. What about when Castform is not a water type? Are they suggesting that if it's a sun, if sun is up, that it would be like fire flying? But that wouldn't make sense because that wouldn't be a liquid. So they're just always water, even though Castform's whole concept is that it changes types into different things. I almost think that this is too much, and this should just be a different Pokemon. This should be some Pokemon themed around like liquid, solid, gas, and plasma that is not related to Castform at all. It feels like you are overwriting the concept of Castform with this new concept that is at odds with the original idea of Castform in the first place. And it doesn't even feel like Castform anymore. You've created a new thing, and I think that the new thing has potential for sure, but it's almost not even related to weather anymore. It's related to your state of being as like a molecule, like you're a gas or a solid or a liquid. This should be a whole different Pokemon called Molecule Michael or something like that. Molecule themed Pokemon who changes based on what move it selects and becomes different states of being. That's an interesting idea, but this is quite a departure from what I think Castform is supposed to be. But I do very much respect the creativity here, I must say that. Here we have a concept for Mega Castform, where it appears that upon Mega Evolving, Castform is exactly the same, but has a rainbow gradient superimposed on it. And that's very good. Mega Castform seems to have increased stats, as all Megas do, with a newly buffed 135 special attack and 122 speed, and some small buffs to its other stats as well. Quite a good stat distribution, especially the high speed. Mega Castform also has the new ability Meteorologist. This Pokemon's moves are treated as if any applicable positive weather effects are in play, and it has some new weather synergy related moveset additions, including Aurora Veil, all of the weather-dependent healing moves like Shore Up and Morning Sun, Growth, Electro Shot, and Solar Blade. I have to say that Solar Blade is an unnecessary addition when Mega Castform appears to have 25 base attack, but that's alright. It can't hurt to have, I guess. You're probably going to go with Solar Beam instead. I would say that this is an extremely powerful idea. The poster, by the way, is Singularity What on Reddit. I didn't mention that. Forgive me. That's who posted this. They mentioned that the ability is inspired by Mega Soul, which is the new ability for Mega Meganium that acts as if Sun is always up when executing moves. So Solar Beam executes immediately, for example. So does Synthesis benefit from the Sun synergy, whether Sun is up or not. This ability, though, takes this a step further and just calculates what the most advantageous weather effect would be and acts as if that weather effect is always up. I think, to be honest, the big thing that is a bit broken here is Electro Shot. Electro Shot is an incredibly powerful move that has 130 base power, raises your special attack, and also bypasses its own charge turn if Rain is active. This would obviously execute in one turn with Meteorologist, not needing Rain to be up. That alone is probably the most powerful thing here. We've seen Archaladon make great use of Electro Shot, even though it's not a stab move. It's a very high power move that raises your special attack, and Mega Castform here is incredibly fast. You would also have access to healing moves that heal you 75%. I do wonder how good that would be when you're a pretty frail Pokemon, but your defenses are also buffed a little bit here, and 70 HP is workable. I feel like that would be a decent choice to have a healing move that heals for 75. Growth would also effectively work like Nasty Plot. In Sun, Growth grants +2 to attack and special attack. The attack boost is not that relevant, but the special attack boost would be appreciated. Aurora Veil is useful for utility, and Mega Castform would have access to its default move pool with options like a Blizzard, which would have perfect accuracy, Solar Beam, which would bypass its charge turn instantaneously. I suppose Weather Ball would just not do anything here. Actually, they've clarified in the post that Weather Ball would not be affected by Meteorologist, because how could Weather Ball determine what the best weather is for it? It just changes type based on the weather. And it would be a bit broken if it was like Arceus Plate and it just changed to whatever is super effective. That would be a bit much. I guess the only downside to this Pokemon, really, is the fact that it's a normal type, and that's a bad typing. Just a mono-normal type is not that powerful. Castform also doesn't really get any good normal stab special attack. It does not get Hyper Voice or Boom Burst or anything like that, so it would have to be relying purely on non-stab damage. That would be a drawback for it. But I do think that the power of Electro Shot and also the sheer amount of weather synergy you can take advantage of here and the coverage that Castform has access to would be quite powerful here. I think this would be OU power level in singles, probably be pretty good in doubles as well, with Aurora Veil providing valued support, Blizzard hitting both opponents, Electro Shot just being generally very good. I think the Electro Shot Blizzard combo would be a real superstar. That's Bolt Beam coverage. It directly buffs you. The special attack boost almost makes up for the lack of stab, as well as the sheer power of Electro Shot in terms of base power. Now, this would be crazy. This would be very good. From a design perspective, I think it's a bit unfortunate that this would actually remove the type change aspect of Castform completely. It would just make Castform a normal type that has weather synergy on all its moves. It is a unique idea, I guess, but even though it's an extension of the weather concept of Castform, it does erase the unique mechanic it had access to with Forecast. I think there's a reason a lot of people are redesigning the Forecast ability and adding effects to it, because it feels like Forecast is fundamental to the identity of Castform. The ability to change type depending on the weather is the whole thing. So to erase that is a little bit of a betrayal to the concept of Castform, I think. I also think the concept of the ability is a bit crazy. Mega Soul is an ability we've never seen before, but it is understandable because it only applies a single weather effect. To apply multiple different weather effects depending on the move is maybe an extra layer of complexity that is a bit much. It's also just kind of overpowered, especially with Electro Shot. So overall, I think I'm not huge on this one. I respect the originality of the ability concept. It's a pretty cool idea, but in practice, I think it will be a bit much. A little bit unintuitive to understand, maybe a bit complicated, and also a bit overpowered. And not even a very good extension of the original idea of Castform. But that's just my opinion. Maybe some of you are fond of this idea. Here we have another concept for a mega Castform from the Reddit user Levanite. And this one has a dedicated drawing with a new visual look for Castform, who now has a bit of a fluffy appearance with a scarf on and looks like it has some hair as well. Very nice. I like the drawing. Very good. This mega Castform would change Castform's typing to normal and flying as a dual typing. The stats would be increased, 110 speed, and now 90 in the offenses and 80 in each of the defenses. A pretty small stat increase, actually. The new ability would be Atmokinesis. Is that a word? What does that mean? It is a Greek word that means it's a supernatural ability to manipulate the weather. Okay, that's a cool ability name. That seems to make sense. When this Pokemon uses a water, fire, ice, or rock type move, before it moves, it sets the weather to rain, harsh sun, snow, or sandstorm, respectively. Its form changes to match, and its typing becomes flying water, flying fire, flying ice, or rock, respectively. Okay. While this Pokemon is normal flying type, the effects of Cloud9 are in effect. Okay. This is interesting. So it would still have the spirit of the original forecast concept, where every single time it uses a move, it sets the corresponding weather and then also changes your form to match. But instead of being just a mono water type, you know, a flying water type and etc. You have flying typing plus the corresponding type for the weather. And in this case, there is also a sand form that is flying rock. And also the base form has Cloud9 active, which means that it is disabling the effects of other weather while it is in its base form. Which is interesting because that means if the enemy sets weather, it doesn't transform like it usually would have. It just actually disables that and remains in its base state. It can only change form by actually using an attack that corresponds with a weather effect and then setting that weather and changing in that scenario. Okay. I think that this one fits pretty well with the spirit of Castform, maintaining the concept of form change and leaning into the weather thing, where now you use an attack that sets weather. I almost wonder if this would have a role similar to Greninja with Protean, where rather than using this on a weather team for synergy, you would use the Castform as a versatile attacker that changes the weather and its typing based on what attacks it's using. So you could have fire, ice, and water coverage, and then every time you select an attack, you change type and set the weather that is relevant to that moment. It would feel a bit clunky to actually use this for its weather synergy, since it doesn't reliably set weather on switch in, it has to use an attack to set weather. So this is almost like a weather-centric version of Protean, but I do wonder how good it would actually be. You would certainly do a lot of damage and be quite versatile, changing type and setting weather every single time you use an attack. But there is, of course, the issue of the fact that snow and sand do not buff your damage. They just set a weather effect that sometimes synergizes with the types. So you would gain a defense boost in the snow and a special defense boost in the sand. But it could also be useful to sometimes set sand in the scenario where you want either the special defense or the chip damage. You could, of course, overwrite enemy weather at any time. This is a difficult one to evaluate. I feel as if one thing that's making me skeptical of how good it would be is just the stats not being that high for a mega. It would have a usable speed, but 90 in the offensives is probably not enough, even with the weather boosting and the stab damage changing. Although, I don't know, how much special attack does Greninja have as a point of comparison? It has 103 special attack, which is a little bit higher. but maybe it's workable considering that the weather is an effective 1.5x increased for fire and water specifically. The only issue is it only really applies to them. It's not quite as versatile as actual Protean, and also the complementary nature of fire and water is not exactly amazing. They're fairly complementary, I guess. They're decent, but this will be very interesting. I think that it's a good concept. Design-wise, I like it. Even though it's a bit complex, I think it does fit, and it would be pretty intuitive to understand as an extension of normal Castform. It's like an amplified version of the original Castform. As for competitive viability, I'm not 100% certain how good it would be. Also, how does it work if you change form and then switch out and back in? Would you remain the same form until you then select another move? I guess that would be how it works, rather than resetting you to the base form when you switch out. This one has me pondering the implications of its presence, which is probably a sign that the concept is interesting, because I'm trying to imagine it interfacing with the metagame and how it would function. I'd say this is a good idea. It's a good idea. And finally, here we have a proposal for a Castform evolution. This is personally what I want the most, is a Castform evolution, because megas are not in every game. If you give an evolution to Castform, that will remain forever, or at least be just a Pokemon, and Pokemon can exist in any game. So it might become a mainstay of the series moving forward, whereas megas are only temporarily available in some generation. In my opinion, the best idea is to give it an evolution. But that's not to discredit the people theory crafting it as a mega concept. That would also be cool, of course. But anyway, here is the proposed evolution concept called Castozone, with a little drawing to accompany. In its base form, it looks as if it now has clouds surrounding it, as if it's in the ozone layer, I suppose. Castozone. That's fun. Almost sounds like Magnazone, doesn't it? Let's look at the visual designs first. We have sunny form, also now surrounded by clouds. Rainy form is in a strange sphere and looks very upset. That's interesting. Wow. Things are not looking good for rainy Castozone. And then we have snowy form, who is once again surrounded by a sphere of clouds and also has a snowman atop the head, which is a nice touch. That's cool. So all of these are now fairy as a dual type. Normal fairy in the base form with a slight stat increase up to 90 HP and 85 in all the rest. And the ability Forecast is also reworked to now add 30% base power to moves depending on what weather effect is active. So if no weather effect is active, 30% damage to normal moves, fire if sun is active, water if rain is active, and ice if snow or hail is active. Understood. So it's got a 30% damage increase that corresponds to the state of the weather. The fire type form is designed as a physical attacker here with pretty low speed of only 75, but a much higher 120 attack, and a fire fairy typing, which would be a first for the series. We've never seen this typing before. It also seems that, okay, what am I reading here? This is difficult to comprehend. Under the sunny form section, it seems there's also a signature move called Climate Change, which has 90 power and 100 accuracy with 5 PP, that summons a random weather, the type of the move, depending on it. Okay, so it, when clicked, sets a random weather and then changes type to match the weather, similar to Weather Ball. But it first summons a weather, which would then also change your form. I do not know if it is a physical or special attack. They have not clarified this. Can I Control F, Climate Change? Okay, it says here in a comment that it is actually physical or special depending on the higher attacking stat, similar to the move Photon Geyser. So it's got also the Photon Geyser effect. That's a lot of stuff for one attack, I gotta say. It summons weather, changes type, and also has the Photon Geyser effect. Might be a bit much for one move, but it would be powerful. That would be a powerful concept, if not a bit random. Would be a little bit random. I don't know if I love the concept of the signature move, I must say. It's random weather, sort of leaving it in God's hand, whether you become like an ice or a fire or water type. That's sort of ludicrous. That's kind of crazy, but it's a unique idea. We got to say that. So the water form seems quite good, with a water fairy typing, which is an amazing combo. You have 90 HP, 95 defense, 120 special attack, and 110 special defense with a lower speed of 45, but these are pretty great stats and a great typing. This water form seems promising. And then the snowy form would be, well, goodness gracious, the snowy form seems quite powerful with 110 speed, 90 HP, and 140 special attack, and an ice fairy typing. We also know that Castform has blizzard, and it has bonus ice damage in the snow due to its ability. So I think that the standout form here seems to be the snowy form, which has a very high special attack and a perfectly accurate blizzard with even further damage increase on top of that. Does this change form based on what move it uses? No. That was the last one, sorry. That's a common one that they do. When you attack, you change weather and form. But no, this just has plus 30% base power depending on the weather and corresponding with the type of the weather. It also occurs to me that in the section of the presentation that shows off rainy form, they have now shown us the notable move additions, which maybe should have been a separate slide. It's a bit weird to include this important information like this on the same slide as the proposed new concept for an alternate form. I also must draw attention to the fact that why is the notable moves section written in a normal typeface, whereas everything else seems to be handwritten in MS Paint, including the text of the signature move is written out by hand here, in a very beautiful writing, I must say, very lovely. But some things are written in actual text, and you have screenshotted Bulbapedia and then added an addendum with your handwriting instead of just like typing it out. I gotta say that the formatting is very avant-garde here, and that I think it gives it a surrealist quality, which I would bump up artistically. Very interesting to just sort of change into typeface for this particular section and add notable moves in the rainy form slide. It's a bit like how Citizen Kane is told out of order, you know? They're very innovative for the time, and this is very innovative in much the same way. Notable moveset additions here include actual fire physical attacks like Flare Blitz and Fire Punch and Heat Crash, which is noteworthy, of course, for the physical-leaning fire form, which would probably be quite good on Sun teams with its powerful 30% attack boost and high attack boosted further by the Sun. That would be quite an overwhelming breaker, perhaps comparable to something like a Darmanitan. Maybe a bit worse due to a low speed, but better in its typing and damage output, possibly. It doesn't seem that there are any fairy type attacks added to the move set, and I am now questioning why this would be a fairy type thematically speaking. It would be very good to be a fairy type defensively, but I'm not so sure that Castform or Castozone is a fairy. It's not a mythical being. I guess it could be, but it's not like something you would see in a forest where gnomes live. It's more like a strange mythical creature. I don't know if fairy fits exactly. Suppose you could stretch the logic to have it fit. I don't know. I think that I would give credit to this concept for an evolution, to the name. Castozone is a good name for a Castform evolution. I could see them actually calling it that. But I think that perhaps the idea here is a bit all over the place. The most insane part of it is the signature move that summons a random weather. I think that's a bit too much variance for something that has such a high impact, like changing your type and stuff. You don't want to leave that in God's hands. You want to have control over that and be intentional with it, I think. I'll say that it's an interesting form of weather synergy here, where perhaps snow teams could actually afford to run Castozone as a powerful blizzard spam entity. This kind of thing is not super successful in competitive snow synergy just for a powerful threat like this, but maybe it could work in this case, because this is a pretty insane Pokemon with the 30% boost on a 140 base special attack and a pretty high speed too. Plus defense boost in the snow might have an impact. This could be enough to honestly consider an offensive snow team, which we would never have seen before, so maybe that's a cool part of this. I'm not sure about the identity of the rain form. I don't know how well this would work as a rain threat. Rain team's very aggressive. This is a slow breaker. It's a good typing, but you could sort of just run Primarina, who doesn't need to rain to exist and is pretty similar. And the sun form is kind of like a weird, almost feels like a Victini or a Darmanitan, those very powerful fire type breakers that just click a huge move. This one would be clicking Flare Blitz or Heat Crash. Good name and decent concept, but it's a bit all over the place and a bit crazy as well. It is clear to see that Castform captures the imagination, has a lot of potential for some cool new buff or new evolution. And there is a reason that so many people propose these ideas for it and go crazy imagining what it could do. It's that kind of Pokemon that just is begging for something more. And I do hope they deliver on that. I hope in Gen 10 they actually create a new Castform evolution. That would be my particular hope, is that it gets an actual new evolution. It's a strangely weak single stage Pokemon that feels like it really deserves an evolution. And I wonder if any of these concepts will actually be what they decide to do, or close to what they decide to do in the real game. Certainly makes you think, what would you do for Castform, folks? How would you buff it? And what do you think of all of these proposed changes? Are they a bit much? Did you enjoy some of them? Do you think some of them would be fun? You let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching. As a result of watching to the end, you are visited by the enigmatic dog. This dog is not offering you anything, and is not providing you any blessings. He simply exists.